based on a true story. At the time, Norma was working at a childcare center in the city of Serang. Besides taking care of the children, she was also responsible for handling logistics for religious study gatherings, making sure food supplies were always prepared for the events. Norma lived with her mother, Rena, a woman known for her cold demeanor. Her face rarely showed emotion, even toward Norma, her own daughter. Rena was distant, reserved, and emotionally closed off. Norma's father, Abdul, lived in Jakarta due to work. Because of this, he was rarely home, and only visited occasionally to see Norma and Rena. One afternoon, everything began with what seemed like an ordinary, even religious encounter. That day, a man named Irfan was forced to replace one of his employees who had fallen ill. He had to drive the company's fruit delivery truck to drop off an order at the place where Norma worked. At the same time, Norma was there with Rena, attending a religious study session. The fruit delivery Irfan brought turned out to be ordered by Norma herself for the event. That was the moment Irfan noticed her. Not just because of a passing attraction, but because he suddenly realized that Norma was actually his former schoolmate from years ago. Irfan tried to start a conversation, slowly getting closer, even asking for her phone number. Norma politely declined. She excused herself and walked away, leaving Irfan standing there with feelings he had not yet fully understood. But from that moment on, Irfan could not stop thinking about her. It was the kind of first impression that quietly planted a seed. On the way home, Norma gently told Rena that she had received an offer to become a religious studies teacher at Tunas Bangsa Elementary School. Rena was not entirely supportive, not because she was not proud, but because she worried Norma would become too busy and exhausted. Norma stood firm. She felt this was the path she wanted to take. When they arrived home, they met Abdul, who had just come from Jakarta. The relationship between Abdul and Rena felt cold and distant. There were no warm gestures, no affectionate words, just silence between them. Later, Abdul invited Norma to go out with him. Rena refused to join, so only the two of them went and ended up eating together at the town square. Fate brought another unexpected meeting. Norma ran into Irfan again. This time, it was not just Norma who noticed him. Abdul immediately took a liking to Irfan. In Abdul's eyes, Irfan seemed polite, calm, and well-mannered. From that moment on, Irfan began visiting Norma more often after she finished teaching. At first, it was harmless. He would accompany her, chat casually, and make sure she got home safely. One night, Norma returned later than usual, and Irfan, who happened to be nearby, offered to walk her home. When they arrived, the atmosphere at home changed instantly. Rena was already waiting, her face filled with anger. Norma was scolded harshly simply for coming home with a man. That night revealed something important. Rena had never liked any man getting close to Norma, for reasons she never clearly explained. What seemed like a simple reunion was only the beginning of a much deeper conflict. Norma, caught between mother-in-law and son-in-law. The next day, Norma began distancing herself from Irfan. She refused to be escorted home anymore. But instead of backing away, Irfan changed. He became more serious. He asked Norma to talk about the future, about a relationship that was not just temporary. There was only one condition. If they were going to be together, Irfan believed he had to win over Rena first. From that point on, Irfan began carefully building his image in front of Rena. He often offered his help, showed up with polite manners, and even gave small gifts like lipstick. They seemed trivial, but little by little, they started to soften the distance between them. Everything he did had one clear purpose: to prove that he was worthy of being Norma's partner in Rena's eyes. Still, Rena remained cold. There were no smiles, no words of approval, and no sign of blessing. Feeling stuck, Irfan decided to take a different path. He invited Norma to Jakarta to meet her father, Abdul. After all, if they were going to get married, Abdul would be the one to give his consent. Once in Jakarta, Irfan showed his seriousness directly to Abdul. He brought Norma all that way with genuine intentions. Abdul saw this and his heart softened almost instantly. He agreed without hesitation. The three of them decided that Abdul would speak directly to Rena. But when Abdul tried to share the news that night, the conversation quickly turned into an argument. Rena refused without giving any clear reason.
Kamu ini sebenarnya nentang-nentang begini karena peduli sama Norma? Atau karena kamu nggak mau lihat dia bahagia?
Bahagia? Tahu apa dia soal bahagia?
Abdul insisted, feeling that Rena did not want to see her own daughter happy. That was when an old secret finally came to light. Rena had married Abdul without love. In the end, the wedding still happened. Irfan and Norma officially became husband and wife. Yet one face remained unchanged, Rena's. There was no smile, no joy she could truly feel. After the marriage, Norma and Irfan continued living in Rena's house. The reason was simple. Abdul wanted Irfan to look after both Norma and Rena. At the same time, Irfan hoped that by staying there, he could eventually earn Rena's sympathy. But the first night of the marriage became the beginning of an invisible wound for Rena. She accidentally overheard the sounds of Irfan and Norma through the wall. Sounds that were natural for newlyweds, yet painful for her. Jealousy and envy crept in, because Norma had something Rena never truly experienced: love. The next day, another problem began to surface. At Irfan's workplace, he was once again approached by a woman named Etni. She was a coworker and also his former girlfriend. Her flirtation was not casual. She crossed boundaries that should never be revisited by someone from the past. That was the first real red flag. Before being with Norma, Irfan had maintained a long and inappropriate connection with Etni. Later that afternoon, Irfan and Norma were eating together when Norma suddenly had an idea. She wanted to collect some capital and open a meatball stall, specifically for Rena. Irfan immediately agreed. Without much calculation, he decided to fund everything himself. The plan quickly became reality. The stall turned into a major turning point in Rena's life. Business was good, customers kept coming, and her face slowly came back to life as if she had found a reason to wake up every morning again. Still, something unusual began to stir within Rena. After the stall closed, Norma would usually go home first with Irfan. Before leaving, Irfan politely said goodbye and kissed Rena's hand. It was a small gesture, but it left a deep impression on her. It had been a long time since any man had treated her that way. That night, Irfan returned to the meatball stall to take Rena home. On the way, their motorcycle hit a pothole. Instinctively, Rena grabbed onto Irfan from behind. From that moment, something inside Rena began to change. She started paying more attention to her appearance, dressing up more often and wearing the lipstick Irfan had given her. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen again as a woman, not just as a tired mother. A few days later, Irfan's coworkers began stopping by the stall more frequently. Among them was Etni, Irfan's former girlfriend, who was still openly flirtatious and clearly seeking attention. That behavior did not go unnoticed by Rena, who had quietly started looking at Irfan in a different way. Later that night, Norma finally found out. Rena mentioned Etni to her, and the information immediately made Norma uneasy. Suspicion began to grow. From then on, Norma often checked Irfan's phone at night. The next day, Norma discreetly asked one of Irfan's coworkers about Etni's behavior at the office. That was when she learned Etni was known for being flirtatious. Even more upsetting, Etni still kept photos of herself with Irfan on Instagram, photos she had never deleted since their breakup. That discovery deeply bothered Norma. One evening after work, Irfan accidentally brushed against Rena. In that brief moment, he felt something he knew he should not feel. A forbidden thought crossed his mind, only to be quickly pushed away, as if he realized he had just stepped into dangerous territory. The issue with Etni soon came to a head. The undisclosed past, the lingering photos, and the fact that Irfan had hired his own ex became the trigger for a major argument between Irfan and Norma that night.
Tapi AA nggak bilang kalau Etni mantan AA. AA yang rekrut Etni.
Kalau masalah rekrut ada banyak yang nggak rekrut, bukan cuma Etni.
Ya udah.
For the first time, Irfan raised his voice. He said he was exhausted and did not want to fight after a long day at work. The argument ended with Irfan choosing to sleep outside the bedroom. Rena noticed and approached him. She asked why he was sleeping there. By then, Rena's attitude toward Irfan had clearly changed. She was warmer, more attentive. That attention slowly turned into physical closeness when she began massaging his back. The atmosphere became awkward, yet strangely intimate. Emotions took over. Irfan even praised Rena's appearance that night, making her feel desired again. He also complimented the scent of her skincare, the same one he had once given her. The following evening after work, Irfan chose not to go straight home. The tension from the argument with Norma still lingered. Instead, he went to the meatball stall to see Rena, who was preparing to close for the night. A light rain began to fall, creating an atmosphere that felt even more intimate. Under the dim lights of the food stall, Irfan started praising Rena, describing her as a strong, firm, and independent woman. The compliments kept flowing, slowly drawing Rena in. Eventually, Irfan lost control and leaned in to kiss her. When a second kiss almost happened, Rena suddenly came to her senses and stopped him. She knew what they were doing was wrong, even though she could not deny that part of her had enjoyed the moment. Rina immediately sent Irfan away, and that night he went home as if nothing had happened. When he arrived, Irfan apologized to Norma about the issue with Etni. He admitted his mistake, confessing that he had not been honest about Etni being his former girlfriend. Overcome with regret, Irfan broke down in tears, as if trying to wash away all the conflict with remorse. Norma softened, and that night the problem with Etni seemed to be resolved. The next morning, Norma surprised Irfan with good news. She had officially been accepted as an elementary school teacher. As a way of celebrating, Norma gifted Irfan a brand new motorcycle, replacing his old one that often broke down. Irfan responded by giving her a honeymoon trip out of town for several days. They appeared to be a very happy married couple. Yet, during those days away, something strange happened. Instead of feeling complete, Irfan and Rina found themselves missing each other in ways they could not explain. At one point, Abdul caught Rina kissing Irfan's work clothes. At the same time, Norma unexpectedly found Irfan inhaling the scent of the skincare Rina usually wore. At night, Irfan became restless and struggled to sleep, his mind filled with thoughts of Rina. Even when he was close to Norma, Rina's presence often appeared in his thoughts. After returning from the honeymoon, Irfan could no longer suppress his longing. In broad daylight, he skipped work just to see Rina at the meatball stall. The place was quiet, with only the two of them there. Without thinking, Irfan pulled Rina into the empty storage room behind the stall and kissed her. What they did nearly got discovered when Mrs. Fitri heard suspicious noises coming from the storage area. After knocking, Rina quickly stepped out and claimed they were dealing with a rat. Ironically, the tension did not stop them. Once back at home, Irfan and Rina continued what had been interrupted earlier while Norma was asleep. Faint sounds were heard, enough to wake Norma and make her check Rina's room. Irfan had already hidden. Rina quickly slipped Irfan's clothes under a pillow. After it was over, Rina broke down in tears. She was trapped in a painful dilemma, realizing that throughout her life she had never truly known love. From that point on, their forbidden relationship only grew more frequent. Irfan often stopped by the meatball stall during the day, using excuses to be close to Rina. Meanwhile, Norma was touched less and less. Irfan increasingly chose Rina over his own wife. Mrs. Fitri eventually became suspicious. She noticed Irfan coming home far too often during the daytime. Along with her neighbors, her doubts grew. At one point, she even brought a ladder to peek into Irfan's room after hearing the sound of a woman inside. Unfortunately, that attempt failed because Rina noticed her first. Still convinced something was wrong, Mrs. Fitri forced her way into the house, insisting she had just heard moaning from the room, even though she did not yet know who the woman was. That day, Irfan narrowly escaped being exposed because no one was found inside the room. The next day, Norma opened up to Rina. She admitted she was starting to feel suspicious. Irfan had been coming home in the middle of the day more and more often without ever giving any explanation. Rina responded briefly and coldly, offering no advice and no reassurance. Feeling she was getting nowhere, Norma decided to seek answers on her own and went to meet Etni. From that meeting, Norma learned how Irfan was seen by others. He was the type of man who liked to flatter women and was drawn to those who were gentle, nurturing, and attentive. Traits Norma had always believed described herself. The following day, Norma planned to surprise Irfan. She tried calling Rina, but the call went unanswered because at that very moment, Rina was with Irfan. Norma then went to Irfan's office, only to be told by his co-workers that he had already left hours earlier. Around the same time, Mrs. Fitri noticed Irfan sneaking back into the house and carefully hiding his motorcycle. Sensing something was wrong, she grabbed a ladder and peeked into the room. What she saw made her knees go weak. Rina and Irfan were together in a way that was beyond anything she could have imagined. Her hands trembling with anger, Mrs. Fitri immediately called out to the neighbors to raid the house. Within moments, the house was filled with people. Footsteps and shouting blended into chaos. Tragically, just as the crowd gathered, Norma arrived home carrying a birthday cake. Mrs. Fitri tried to steady Norma as the truth began to unfold. Not long after, the neighbors forced their way inside. Norma saw Irfan hurriedly getting dressed, while Rina was still barely covered by a bedsheet. In that instant, Norma's world collapsed. She walked out of the house while Irfan and Rina were escorted away, restrained by security, and recorded by the surrounding crowd. After that night, Norma stayed temporarily with Mrs. Fitri. Irfan tried to see her, but Norma had completely closed her heart. Mrs. Fitri even chased him away, giving him no chance to explain. Not long after, Abdul returned from Jakarta. He could only stand in silence as he saw his daughter broken, weak, and eventually falling ill. Filled with anger and disappointment, Abdul confronted Rina, and a major argument erupted.
Keluarga kamu yang maksa. Aku nggak pernah minta anak itu. Aku ngelahirin anak itu. Aku ngegedein dia sendiri.
During that confrontation, Rina defended herself by bringing up her past. She revealed that none of this life had been her choice. When she was just 17, she had been forced to marry Abdul and later gave birth to Norma. According to Rina, Abdul and his family had stolen her youth. She felt trapped in a loveless marriage, living a life of obligation, forced to raise a child from a man she never truly loved. She even blamed Abdul for being largely absent in Norma's upbringing. Most painfully, Rina admitted that she had never truly loved Norma, seeing her as a burden, a child born from a marriage without love. Those words struck Norma harder than the raid itself. As a daughter, she realized she had never truly been wanted. All this time, Norma had grown up with respect and love for her mother. That very night, with his heart completely shattered, Abdul filed for divorce. It was a bitter ending to a betrayal too deep to forgive. After the incident went viral, Irfan's life collapsed almost overnight. He was officially fired from his job. He walked out with his head down, carrying a shame that was now known by countless people. On the other side, Abdul broke down and finally admitted his own mistake. He confessed that he had once caught Rina kissing Irfan's work clothes. At the time, he chose to stay silent and never told Norma about it. Deep down, Abdul had already felt something was wrong, and his suspicion eventually turned into a painful reality. A few days after the incident, Norma was still staying at Rina's house while Irfan had been driven out. During that time, Norma tried to gather her strength. She struggled to forgive, trying to accept and let go of the betrayal that had shattered her life. Ironically, the very next day, Norma once again found Irfan's motorcycle hidden inside the house in broad daylight. With mixed emotions, she went inside and discovered Irfan was there again. It turned out that Irfan and Rina had just been together once more, despite everything that had already happened. Even after being exposed, there was no sense of regret. Rina was still trying to protect him. When Norma forced Irfan to leave, he accidentally dropped the motorcycle ownership documents. From that, Norma realized Irfan intended to take the motorcycle she had once gifted him and claim it as his own. Norma tried to stop him and take it back, but she did not have the strength. She fell and broke down in tears. Her heart shattered for the second time. Norma told Abdul about what happened. The shock was too much for him. Abdul collapsed and had to be rushed for medical treatment. With support from her religious teacher and family, Norma eventually made the difficult decision to take the case to court. During the trial, Irfan showed no remorse. He accused Norma of being ungrateful and said she should have chosen forgiveness instead of reporting him. Rina also spoke harshly, calling Norma an ungrateful and disobedient child. In the end, the judge ruled that Rina and Irfan were guilty and sentenced them to prison. Even so, a few days later, Norma still visited Rina. She tried to forgive. She even invited her mother to go on an Umrah pilgrimage together after her release. Rina responded with silence, without saying a single word. That visit became Norma's last. She walked out of the prison slowly, her face steady, carrying wounds that might never fully heal. So the moral of the story is never trust a man who flirts at a bakso stall and thinks bad choices can be fixed with romance and a motorbike.